guys, my name is Girish Bali, your host for today for Back to Basics, another Back to Basics on Friday. Now, today we have a topic. Oh, well, you know what? Let me invite the person because it seems like I'm so overwhelmed with this person. He is a Communication Officer. He's a VP Marketing. He's an author. He's a podcaster. It's just amazing. It seems like there's like 4 or 5 people that I'm inviting, but it looks like it's just one person. His name is Charles K. Poole. So, Charles, thank you for coming on my show.
Sure. Good morning.
Good
And thank you
morning.
for the invitation. I was really surprised and honored to receive it.
Oh no, my pleasure. My actually is my honor to invite you. Thank you again. So, Charles, before we get into the basics of your life and your your journey, what does back to basic mean to you?
It means always remembering where you began, where you hope to go, and the work that's required to get there. My mama used to always say that life is really simple. It's humans who complicate things.
Yeah.
And that's something that has fueled my sense of how I live into each day as long as I can remember. So it means keeping it simple in the context of remembering where you began and where you have the possibility of eventually going.
So Charles, so let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So you work full time,
Mhm.
you write a book,
Mhm.
and you do a podcast. When do you sleep?
I don't need a lot. Um, I think that for me, so much of getting older is the appreciation that you have a limited amount of time and to use what time you have as effectively and as decisively as possible. So I'm an early riser. I get up usually between 2 and 3 every morning.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, I go to bed about 8:30 every night, but that's my window of time to sleep. My mind is constantly active because being a person who is aware he is alive, I'm constantly thinking about what I can do and what I can add. So I don't need a lot of sleep, but the sleep I do require, I really require. And if I don't get it, I turn into the grouch the next day. But I believe that you have to make the most of every moment because they are precious. And as a result, I think I've just learned over the years how to effectively utilize all the possible time I have to do all the possible things I can imagine.
Wow. So I wish that I will will be in your shoes eventually one day, to do this massive thing that you have done. So first thing is first, Charles. Um, you mentioned so much about diversity on social media. Is Why is it a hoopla nowadays? I mean, diversity was always there, but why is it more open now, and why is it a bigger topic today?
Well, I don't know if diversity has really always been there. I think that for some people it has been. I think for other people it's been an afterthought. Um, Lately, I have been very cognizant of what's going on in the world, obviously. I think that one of the things that happened many months ago, when we look back at last year and the year before, is that eventually people got at least a part of the message, which is that there are people in the world who still believe other people in the world don't have the right and opportunity to have equivalency across the broad spectrum of how we all live. And when that message finally got through, people set up and paid attention. I'm not always sure that that attention is authentic. When we saw a number of companies starting to sign on to things that looked like they were supporting diversity last year,
Mm-hmm.
I called it bandwagoning
Mm-hmm.
because everybody hopped on the bandwagon at the same time. And I provided a little bit of a cautionary warning that let's not all assume that what we see going on today is what is going to be representative tomorrow. Let's give people time and see if they live into this promise that they're making so that it's not just something that's going to be, quote, good for business, end quote, but something that's really going to move the needle in terms of people really living up to the possibilities of what diversity and inclusion can mean. So I'm still waiting to see. I will certainly be judging to determine if it's actually a real thing. but I don't think that it's necessarily a true indicator yet that we are where we need to be,
Mhm.
because we all still have a very far way to go.
So, when people, because I'm going through that same struggle, and so are you. But let me
Right.
just ask you this question here: is diversity more into race or gender or both or one or the other?
Well, let's keep it simple. Diversity is accepting that there are people who exist in the same world you exist in,
Yeah,
who are different from you across a number of different areas of interest, from gender to thought, and the idea that that's okay. That's
yeah,
really it in a nutshell. It shouldn't ever be a case of this person's different than I am, so therefore they deserve less, or I get the opportunity to treat them in a certain way, whatever the distinction is.
yeah.
I believe that we're all part of humanity. And as long as we're all part of humanity, we are given the same opportunities to live a full, enriched, I think, open life as
Yeah.
possible. My issue is with anyone who would stand in the way of anyone's right to do that just because it's not their approach or their choice. So that's what diversity means to me. And, no matter who you are or where you come from, there is a tendency to want to treat certain people a certain way if we put ourselves above them, if we
Yeah.
think that their way of living is inconsistent with ours. And no matter who you are, if you are doing that, you have an issue that needs addressing. And that's when we are actually able to get to the real work of diversity, is everyone being open to the fact that there are other people who are different from themselves everywhere.
And Charles, so do you think this diversity, or you think this is a fad, or do you think it's here to stay?
Well, it's not the first time we've seen it, has it been? I
No.
mean, this is again going back to that issue about whether it's bandwagoning or actual activity.
Yeah.
Anything that generates profits, people seem to sign on to. And if there seems to be interest in general around a certain topic these days, all of a sudden people jump on and they're like, okay, let's make sure that we represent this in terms of who we are. But that doesn't get back to anything beyond the appearance of being diverse. I want it to be more than looking the part. I want it to be living the part. And that is 24/7, 365. So that's again the reason that I am taking my position,
Hmm.
and I am watching and waiting and judging to see who actually delivers on the promise of what they say they're doing.
Yeah, I really hope this is not a fad and this is a normalcy,
Yeah.
for every day, as you say, 365.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
do you think, I already know the answer. Do you think this is an HR thing or this is a everyone thing?
I don't really think that it is something that human resources can own alone, because human resources does not control individual behavior.
Yeah.
It can only give ideas of what the potentials are. I think that it is an educational and awareness thing. But that runs the course of everyone who is in an organization, from the senior leadership and executives to every individual employee who is in the workplace interacting with people who are different from themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, when I was in high school, about to graduate and head to college, um, my guidance counselor was encouraging me to go to an HBCU, which, if people don't know what that means, that's a historically Black college or university.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, though, is that I grew up in a neighborhood where everyone looked like me. It was probably the last time that that was the case. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the shopkeepers, the teachers, even the law enforcement, they all looked like me. So when I was ready to go to college, I remember sitting in that room with Mrs. Geneva Richardson, who was my guidance counselor, and I still remember her name. And she was trying to get me to go to her alma mater, which was Fisk, which would have been great in any other circumstance. But I had no experience with anyone other than my own people.
Own people.
And I remember when she broached the idea, I just immediately gave the very honest answer I tend to give, which was, Mrs. Richardson, I don't want to go there because I need to see some other kinds of people.
Sure.
Now, I wasn't rich. My family was poor. We couldn't even afford officially be poor. We were more like Poe. So I went to a school that was in my own town, St. Louis. down the street, literally from my high school, but it was a global campus. And I learned so much about other people. I'd never met anyone who was Catholic. I'd never met anyone who was of any different level of understanding than what I had for the majority of my life. Going to St. Louis University, which is where I did my undergraduate studies, was what made me open my eyes and see the world for all it could be versus the very insulated view I had of what it was. So when you combine both where I came from and where I was able to go as a result of that choice, it made me more of a global citizen and fully understanding of the capacity that exists within each of us to be open to people from everywhere, with every kind of thought, with every kind of persuasion. So it was a really good decision for me.
So Charles, you know, when the word diversity comes in, there are two things come in my mind, and I grew up back in the 80s, you know, with high school, with this whole problem of can I say race? I guess a race issue, you know? So there are two things comes in my mind. One is the episode of French Prince of Bel-Air. Now, I don't know if you remember one of the episode. I don't even remember which season, which episode, but I remember this scene quite well that, you know, Will Smith and his brother, when they were driving down the street, and they got pulled over by a cop, and the cop said that, you know what, this is a white community, not a black community, and they got arrested too on top of that. That hurt me a little because that why is that? I don't know how to explain it. It's just that episode kind of hurt me a little. So that's one. Second is obviously I'm Indian, South Asian, as people they call it. When I grew up in the apartments, people used to say in that area, in that time, dot busters. Now, what are dot busters? Those are Indian ladies who have red dots in the middle of their forehead, and they targeted them. So I grew up with that. So it's tough with this diversity. It's tough to go and fight it. I think it's an ongoing thing, Charles. I don't think this is going to be a solution. It's always going to be there.
Sure.
So it's a very tough topic to talk about, but it needs to be talked out and needs to be brought up. So
I remember the episode. Actually, that was Carlton, his cousin.
Yes.
I remember it
Yes.
very well.
Yes.
You know, I worked for a police department earlier on in my career where I was the director of communications, and I have very strong opinions about police officers. I think that in life, that if we look at anyone in any profession, the same thing can hold true. There are some people who work in a profession who are very good at it, and we want those people there because they make a difference. There are other people who gravitate toward various professions who shouldn't be there. They're bad people. And no matter what they say or what they think, they should not be doing work that involves them engaging with different people. I was listening recently to Chris Rock, who said that certain jobs you have to be a good person, such as you can't have an airline pilot who is like, you know, I don't think we're going to land this plane today. That's the same with police work. Now, with that said, I think that we all have to realize that when it comes to these types of matters, you can't allow yourself to just be angry. I think the anger is right. But I think you also have to be self-possessed and self-aware so that you know history. Part of the problem that we have in this world today is that no one remembers the past, or at least they want us to believe they don't. I think you have to understand what the real issues are. You know, I tell people a lot of times, I look at things where people are crying that it's racist, and I'm like, see, this is a problem for me because there are so many things that people are claiming are racist that are not, that people can't seem to discern what the real ones are. Now, I know what the ancestors went through. I know what real racism was about. And as a result, when people do these things, I think that it changes the debate so that people who are, of course, trying to indicate that there is not racism, that there is not this type of attack on people basically because of the skin that they're born into, that fuels their ability to do so. So we have to be careful to make sure that we are calling a thing, as I like to call it. Third, part of the reason that I'm not immune from racism, but that I am not triggered by it, is the fact that I was fortunate to be raised with a really strong sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very clear on who I am. I'm a dark-skinned Black man living in America, and that has meant a lot of things in the years I've walked the earth.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone throws a phrase at me or a term, I'm thinking, well, I don't know who they're talking to because that's not
Exactly.
me. I'm not triggered by it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that those kinds of understandings and perceptions allow an individual to stand firm in his or her convictions so that they are not bruised and broken by the ongoing assault that will happen when people try to bring you down because of whatever difference it is.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that while we do seemingly dwell in the place of race all the time,
Mm-hmm.
I don't let that be the only area that I focus upon. I, again, am someone who focuses upon the human condition. And there is discrimination, hatred hurled at all kinds of people because of who they are. And if I can't see beyond my individual issue to the other issues that exist as well, that's also problematic. So it's about immersing myself and ourselves in a clearer understanding that anyone who is discriminated against is a potential partner in the fight, and not letting the fact that they are different from ourselves somehow allow us to exclude them from the very battle that we're engaged in. We all have got to come together so that anyone, anywhere, who is at risk of being attacked because of who they are no longer has to dwell in that space. And anyone who is trying to ensure others are going to be forced to live in that space realize that their days are numbered and they get to crawl back under the rocks under which they belong.
Charles, I read this one quote somewhere. I don't remember the exact words, but people are souls. Souls, they get into a vessel, and vessel could be white, black, green, brown, whatever color. So we're part of a vessel. So
right.
But that's how I look at world. I mean,
Right.
that's how you should be looking at the world.
Right.
Yeah. So is you think diversity is like another version of what is it called, the equal employment opportunity? You think when we apply for the positions they have that, or it's crazy when we apply for jobs you have that? So why do we need that?
Well, in theory, we need it to create the equity. That's the theory. In application, there's always the question of whether it becomes just another thing. We all know, those of us, who work in business, that there's always another initiative spurred by some new management dictum or book, and it exists for a while, and people do it because they can say, now, look, we've got that on the checklist, we've checked it off. It all comes down, again, to whether it is just bureaucratic practice or a realization of something that needs to be addressed that is consistently monitored and dealt with in a real-time kind of way. I'm not a big fan of bureaucracy, to be quite honest with you. I think that there are a lot of things that people sign on to and sign up for that don't come into fruition because they're only that. There's something on the checklist that we're supposed to do. I think that we get to help people understand what true diversity, equality, and inclusion can be like when it's practiced in real time, meaning engagement to engagement, person to person. And without that, it's just another thing in a document someplace that when someone is questioned about it, they can pull out that document and say, see, it's part of what we say we're going to do. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in how it's applied and how it operates on a very real level with real people in real time.
Thank you so much for that, Charles. So let's divert a little to happy tone, a little. Happy tone, happy. So about these 3 books.
Wow. Did your research, huh?
Yeah, it's amazing that you came up with these 3 series of I Am series. Can you explain what process you went through with all these 3, or do you not remember now because it's so many years ago and noons ago?
No, it's part of now my fabric, as I like to call it.
Okay.
I'm living in Los Angeles now again. I moved here for the first time in 2008. And when I moved here, I didn't really know anyone. It was a place I wanted to be, but I really didn't have a network. Most of the people I knew are Midwesterners or Southerners. And so I came here not knowing anyone. And in those moments where there was nothing to do, I spent a lot of time in what I call the theater of the mind. And I think a lot about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that while I didn't necessarily have the ability to engage with people, I could take what I was thinking about at the time on any number of subjects, and I can translate that into thoughts on paper, so to speak, although, I was blogging. I've always been a writer. I mean, I studied journalism and communications, and writing has been my catharsis probably all of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took what I was thinking about and I turned it into a blog that over time other people seem to connect with, relate to, understand in very individual and personal ways. And I kept getting this comment, this is, really good stuff. You should turn it into a book. And of course, I'm like, write a book. But I kept writing and kept writing. And eventually I had enough content where those ideas that I should turn into something else seemed to make sense. And the book that I first wrote, which is the one that is the blue one on what is my left, I Am My Own Cause, which is the beginning of it all, is simply a compilation of all of those blog posts categorized by, chapters related to topics of interest to me. Now, that first book was all over the place. I talked about politics. I talked about racism and all of the isms, by the way. I talked about, things that irritated me on television. You name it, I talked about it. But it was giving me my sea legs to understand how I wanted to communicate and why I wanted to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Second book and third book really became more focused upon what I now consider my purpose, my calling, issues of spirituality, humanism, understanding how we exist in the world together and doing what we each can individually to promote that type of unity necessary so we can all get along to do better.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes to me because I'm an observer of life, not just a participant in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have love for humanity. And I figure if each of us take a bit of time from our day and do something that is more about putting more good into the world than we take from it, that gives us a purpose that continues for the remainder of our days. So that's what the books are really now focused upon. So is the podcast I do. So are the Poole Proof Wisdom moments I do. It's about putting that good into the world and not letting the fact that negativity seems to be all around us drown out the voices of all the people, because it's certainly not just me, who are out here doing the work of trying to make a difference that's for the benefit of all of us.
So
that's the reason.
So Charles, that's the reason why I brought you in this podcast and that Back to Basics is because it looks like your book is kind of matching this show itself. You want to go back to basics as to you want to talk about I am, and that's what it is. I am, because you got to think within yourself first instead of others, right, or anyone else. So I think that's the theme of this show, I guess. It's I am, I guess. And
I think you're right. We live in a world right now where so much is defined by whether other people get you, understand you, like what you post, do what you do.
Yeah.
I come from a different tradition. Coming up as I did, I learned the importance of being what I call fiercely self-aware. And that doesn't mean that you're an egomaniac. It doesn't mean that you're running around saying that, the sun rises and sets with my existence. It means that you know yourself from head to toe, top to bottom, perfectly. That means that I know what works in terms of who I am as an individual. It also means that I understand there is still a lot of crap that I deal with that defines how I approach things. And I'm constantly working on improving those things. But it also eventually means that knowing all of that, you still understand that you have a role, you have a purpose, and that you can serve a greater purpose than simply being alive. Because being alive is great. I love it. Don't know anything else I'd rather do. But beyond that, that is going to pass along one day when I leave this earth. What I learned from my mama and from so many other people before me who have gone on is that it's about what you leave behind in terms of your legacy that other people will know and share. Though
Mm.
my family has been gone for many years now, there are people, my mom passed on in 1992, for instance. But let me tell you, there are people who know that when they are speaking my mother's name, they're speaking her wisdom, and it has arrived in their level of understanding because I have kept it alive. And that's what I mean. When I leave this earth, long after I'm gone, I'm hoping there will be some people who have taken something from what I've taught, which is something from what I took from what my mom and my grandma and my brother and my sister taught, and keep it alive in the world for the common good. That's the reason I do it.
It's more of that you're building your own legacy for others and for yourself too, kind of.
Yeah, yeah, and to leave something behind positive.
Yes.
We know there are a lot of people. I don't think that my life is going to be defined by whether or not there are 5 million pictures of me making duck lips on social media.
Exactly.
That's not what I want.
Exactly.
I want people to say he thought, he learned, he applied, and he shared it. I want to make sure that what I do allows me to deliver gifts to other people in a way that's uniquely my own, but that they can somehow connect with in their own way so that they can look at life and experiences perhaps differently. And if I can do that, then I'm here doing more than just taking up space. I'm putting something back into the world that's worthwhile.
For Charles, you bring up a good point till we go to the next topic here. But when there are a lot of people, which I know, and including myself too, that I lost someone many, many years ago, thinking that, you know what, I think I need to end my life because this is just, I can't live without that person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the end of the day, if you go back to basics, life is so beautiful in many different directions. People, they don't realize. So I'm telling you, ending your life is not the right answer. You got to embrace life. You got to make life so beautiful. Life is just amazing. I don't know how it is. You don't have to have someone around you. You just have to be with you in this life, and that's how I define I am the books that you have created.
Okay, I see. I appreciate that. The thing that I can say that I've learned is that I agree with you in terms of my own experience. It's not something I would do, and I certainly would recommend it for no one. But I do also understand that some of us are different vessels. Some of us have thicker walls, so to speak, that can't be broken.
Yes.
And other of us are very fragile. And it breaks my heart when those people who are fragile in that way come to the conclusion that their only option is to take their life. And I've learned to try not to understand it because I never will, but I've tried to also learn that there are fragile vessels here for a reason, and to take from the experience of what they went through something to help me propel forward my ongoing efforts to make sure that other people come to realize that that's not their only option. So I do get what you're saying on that.
Yeah, because you're in a different timeline as versus they are in, so
Right.
it's tough for put yourself in their shoes type of what they say.
Yeah, in a sense, as I said, there was a point when I was a child. My family was homeless for a while. We lived in the burned out hull of our home for roughly 18 months. It was miserable, painful, the attacks that we underwent, the struggles that we had to endure. But my mom always told me that we are not our circumstances.
Right.
And because of that, we were going to survive this. She didn't know when, because my mom never lied to us. She said, I don't know when, but we're going to get through this. If we can just stick together and stay together, we will get through this. And we did.
Yeah.
And life went on. But at the time when it was happening, there were moments when it hurt like hell. And I wasn't sure I could endure it.
Exactly.
But I always heard that voice in my head reminding me, I am not my circumstances. This will change. And that's what helped me go forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. So, Charles, on the next topic is about your podcast. It's just, your listeners and viewers, you have to understand his podcast name is Foolproof Wisdom, or is it Poole proof wisdom, because
Which is a play on
we'll
foolproof.
think about this 1 second, because it's a very intelligent title that he came up with.
Thank you.
Okay, this podcast I listened to, and I'm gonna give you 2 episodes that it's my favorite. Okay,
Oh,
okay. First of all, this podcast is all about related faith, self-help, personal development, and self-awareness. That's what this podcast is about. Now, Charles, regarding the 2 episodes that I like, I think the title, if I'm not mistaken, is Choose to Live a Memorial Life. Define Your Dash. That's
yeah,
one.
yeah.
The second one, which was so heartbreaking and amazing episode. And these episodes are like 7 minutes, 8 minutes, guys. Just keep in mind, a farewell to Diddy,
Yeah.
gone from the world, but always in his heart. Now, what is that about? So we'll get into that. So Charles, tell me about these 2 episodes. It kind of touched me on these two.
Well, thank you. There's no, there's nothing a person who does what I do with these types of efforts appreciates more than hearing the feedback from someone who has taken them in. The first one about living um, your dash in a memorable way. It begins by talking about understanding that we are all able to live an effective life, and how many of us focus on our successes and our achievements and whatnot. And the beginning of our life, which of course a friend once told me is on our headstones in the graveyard. There's the beginning of our life, represented by our date of birth, and then there is the end of our life, represented by the date of our death. And everyone focuses on that. When were you born? When did you die? But in the middle, there's that little bitty dash that is representative of everything else. And the podcast focuses on how that dash should become what we're focused on, what we're putting into the world, how we're living, how we're growing, how we're becoming what we're intended to be, so that we leave, again, a legacy of our life that is going to be memorable, so that we aren't just people who lived and died, but people who were here and did something. It
Mm-hmm.
was very personal for me because I have either some people consider it the misfortune or the sad reality of the family I was born into. I'm the last remaining member of.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell you that I inherit their legacy and therefore promote it, that's part of me keeping their memory alive. And if they had not lived a memorable life, which I can tap into and now share as part of my own, it would have just been a case of there's the year that they were born, there's the year that they died. So I really enjoyed writing that because I think everybody can get off track regarding their focus and focus on living, meaning being born, and dying, versus what goes in the middle. So I really want people to focus on defining that dash for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is I had a dog that passed away about almost going on 4 weeks now. That was a love of my life. I'm a dog person. I
Mm-hmm.
think there are a lot of people out there. And it happened unexpectedly. And I pretty much did a memorial of him with the podcast, talking about what his life meant, what his life taught me, and how I was going to go forward, remembering everything of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
I did the same thing with another dog I had that passed away in 2018, the little Chihuahua I had.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that was interesting about Diddy, however, is that my sister passed away in 2014. He was her dog.
Mm-hmm.
And when she passed away, it was under some extraordinary circumstances. These are told in a post that's in the third book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was worried because I couldn't get to her, and she ended up passing away by herself. And I was torn apart thinking, oh my God, she died alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then one moment, once I was getting him home after getting him from the house, I realized she wasn't, that he was there with her. And so as she passed into what comes next, she was not alone and he was there taking care of her. And I appreciated that. So I had a very special spot in my heart for him. And I thought he was going to live a lot longer than he did. But when he didn't, it was a very difficult thing to comprehend and accept. So I wrote about it, which is again part of my catharsis. I constantly tell stories of my experiences so that others who may have experienced something similar can share and understand it from the perspective I'm living with. So that's what's behind those two particular podcast episodes.
So, when do you get time to do all this? Charles. It seems like you are a communications officer. You are a marketing guy, and you write and then you podcast. When do you get time to do for yourself? Let's say, or I
Well,
am.
the blessing is that I have a career that is based on what my professional love is.
Yeah.
I went to school for 3 years. In fact, even before college, I was a science nerd and I thought I was going to be a doctor. And I was in my third year of studying pre med, about to take the medical college admissions test. And I realized I just don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Then I proceeded to try on a number of different majors, and none of them fit until I got to the study of journalism and communication, and that light bulb went off. I fell in love, and I've been doing it ever since. First as a journalist, and then transitioning to public relations. It is the one thing without fail that I am certain of is the professional love of my life, because communicating and understanding how people communicate
Mm-hmm.
is such a wonderful skill set.
Mm.
And I can't imagine anything that brings levity and experience to bear in the same way as being a person who understands how I communicate and how others communicate, and effectively being able to do that on a daily basis. So that's how I got there. And as a result, I'm doing what I love. And that's the key, isn't it? Some people say the difference between having a job and a career is doing the job means that you come in and that's what you get paid for. But having a career means that you would do it whether you got paid for it or not. And certainly what I do is what's going to fall into that latter category.
Yeah, I mean, regarding about diversity, you're vocal about that. You have a podcast and you
Mm.
have a book. And if you look at all these three items, including yourself, which is four items, it's all about communication. And it seems like, according to me, you're just the king of communications.
Ah, can you
So
put that on a card somewhere for me?
I
I like
could, I
that.
could, I could. I really
King of
wish.
communication. Well, what I do know is this. It's important to me as a human being to understand not only who I am, that's the hard and easy part, but to be committed to understanding other people and to help others understand how they can understand others better is a gift.
Yeah.
Um, I do it because it brings clarity to situations, and it gives context where none would otherwise exist.
Mm,
I'm a talker, as you can tell.
mm,
A lot of people make the mistake of assuming that because I talk a great deal that I miss, context and detail, and I never do, because I'm constantly observing and listening and understanding, so that I can take what I've learned and what I've experienced, and professionally and personally turn it into effort that allows me to help people come together by communicating more effectively, whatever the circumstance may be. And that's the gift of what I do for a living, is I get to help people become better at doing what we should all be good at to begin with, but need to work on to ensure we're doing it in the right way.
Well,
That's
Charles
what I
is
get to do.
Charles. Just make sure you add me on that list so then you can guide me to be better a person.
Well,
And go ahead.
back at you. I was going to say, because we all need it.
We do, we do. But thank you again, Charles, for it's definitely my honor that you are on my show. Before I let you go, any last words that you want to say to Back to Basics on being here?
Well, I want to again thank you so much for being able to join you today. It really is an honor. And I want to thank you for enhancing and elevating the conversation so that people realize that there are things in the world that are more important than the hardships. The basic existence we all get to lead is one that we should tap into to get us where we need to go. And that means that we don't have to make it so tough, people. We just have to understand, appreciate, and love each other. And there is nothing more basic than that. So thank you for that conversation.
No, Charles, thank you again. It's my honor that you are here, and thank you again for coming on the show.
All right. Blessed be.
Thank you.
All right.
So, guys, we spoke with Charles K. Poole, and we talked about his book. We talked about diversity. We talked about everything else, the book, the podcast, everything. So let me give you a quote of the day, like I always do at the end of the episode. And it's his quote, if you really think about it. You can't categorize diversity based on what a person looks like, it's what that person can do for that organization. And that was by Charles Poole. I mean, he wrote it somewhere, and I hijacked his somewhere on Instagram or somewhere, or LinkedIn, or maybe something like that. Well, anyway, guys, but thank you again for joining my show. As usual, as always, at the end of the episode, I always say, remember, everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Just stay blessed, stay focused, keep on smiling, keep on supporting me, and keep on listening every week, every Friday. Guys, take care. God bless. Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
Continued interaction process post the training for driving results. Since we are talking about, business coaching, training and coaching is combined in the sense that training offers the skill building and coaching ensures that there is a behavior change.
So how do you know the difference when someone tries to give you a scenario? How does one get trained to do this? I mean, I guess you are certified to do this, okay? But I think there must be something it triggers you that this is training versus coaching.
That's right. So if one is looking for skill building, one is looking for a large group intervention, it is in the area of training. If it is more about behavior change, if it is one-on-one, then it's largely in the area of coaching.